Shoo! My name is Michael Rosario, and we are going to learn how to code in R. So I'm going to open up R and move it to the side just like before. And in today's lesson, we are going to be learning about vector functions, plural. And so in the last lesson, we learned how to import CSV files into R and access them. And so if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to change a working directory, go back and look at those lessons, because I'm just going to fly through it right now. Set my working directory. This just might take a second. And again, if my shortcuts don't make any sense, look at those tutorials. They'll help a lot. And I'm going to do temp. I'm gonna just make this arbitrary thing called temp data. And in it, I'm going, well, let's see what files I have first. List files. All right, so I want to import this data01.csv into R, into something called temp data. So to do that, we do read csv data01.csv, and that should work. And now when I type in temp data, we should see numbers. Woo! All right. So today is all about vector functions, and first of all I want to explain what a vector is. And the easiest way that I can explain a vector is if you look at this table here, or this data frame. You should get used to this lingo. But when I look at this table, I could see that they're separated into three columns. Here's one column, here's another, and then there's the third. Each one of these columns is a vector. And that's the easiest way to think about it. So for example, if I wanted to pull out the third column here, that would be a vector. So let's do that. So I'm going to type in temp data, and I'm going to use the square bracket. So this is a new thing. Anytime you want to subset anything, or just pull some specific values out of a variable or a table in this case, a square bracket is the way to go. And in this case, since we have a table that is in 2 dimensions, rows and columns, we're going to need a comma. And this is just something that you're going to need to memorize. But to the left of the comma go the row numbers, and to the right of the comma go column numbers. And so what does this mean? That means if I want to access, in this case, the third column, which is labeled as force, under column, I just need to replace that with a number 3. Now under rows, if I want the first row, then I would just put a 1, or second row, put a 2. But if I want to access all rows, then you can just leave that blank. So let's look at this really closely. This means that I want to access a subset, because of the square brackets, I want to access a subset of temp data that includes all rows in column 3. So when I hit enter, it should give me a list of numbers that look like that. So let's hit enter. And you can match it up and you can see 0.432, 0.432, 0.435, 0.435, and so on and so on and so on. And this is a vector. You could also, instead of a column vector, you could have a row vector. What if I wanted to look at just this first row here? Just as easily, you just type in temp data. I want to access the first row and all columns, so I leave that blank. And there you see the first row. Alright, so why is this important? I think this is really important when it comes to doing really simple functions on columns. For example, I have this column here called force, and it evaluates to this list of numbers. What if I wanted to find out the maximum value in this list of numbers? Well, you could just do max, and then put in your temp data column 3. Once again, I'm going to deconstruct this because this is very confusing the first time, but it's easier to work inside out. So we know that we're working with temp data, and we know we want all rows in column 3. Now, there's a function here called max, and notice that temp data 3 is inside the max function. So what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate this list of numbers and then find the maximum number of it. And so when we hit enter, we see that the maximum value is 1.98. We could just as easily do min, which is the minimum. And by the way, I didn't mention this before, but the arrow keys are your friend in R. So if you type up, the up arrow key, it goes through your history of typed commands, and you can go up and you can go down, but it's just an easy way instead of having to copy and paste or retype the entire command. So we have max min. Another popular one is mean, if you wanted to find the mean of those numbers, and of course their standard deviation, or ST. And those are the main ones. But yeah, it's really important to feel comfortable with this sort of syntax, because I think that you'll see it a lot, especially when you're exploring your data and you're trying to figure out what's going on in your data set. And what's really cool is you could do combinations of things. So for example, what if, let's just look at temp data and bring that back up. So what if you wanted to zero your force? What if your true force, even though it's reading 0.432, even though it's reading that at time 0.1, what if it's really 0 and you want to zero everything and make it so that the values range from 0 to any positive number? The way to do that, and this is what I've done in the past, is, okay, let's just start from scratch. This will be all the rows in column 3, so this is our force, right? And what we want to do, let me just put that up. What we want to do is subtract from it the first value, from every value, right? So what we can do here is we could subtract temp data square bracket 1, 3. All right, so let's take some time to break this down. We know what this evaluates to. We can see from above that it's this list of numbers, right? So that's a vector. But when we come down here, it's temp data 1, 3. So that means the first row, third column, this is a scalar. It's a single number. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this number 0.432 and subtract it from every number in this vector. So when we hit enter, we see that now we have a new vector that starts at 0 and with all numbers positive. Alright, so that's one. Another one that we can do is a normalizing sort of operation. So let's look at time. So that would be the first column, so temp data 1. And here's our time. And that's great, but what if we really wanted to do is divide each one of these by the final time, which is 2.5 seconds. That way we could put it into a percent sort of perspective. Well, what we can do is take that temp data column 1 and divide it by the maximum in temp data column 1. So again, just think through this and think what is actually happening here. And I'll leave that as a thought exercise for you. But when you hit enter, you can see, oh, what happened? Oh, I didn't close off my parentheses. So when you see this plus sign, see, usually you'll see this red greater than. When you see a plus sign, that means that something didn't close off properly. So if you scan back, you'll see that I forgot to put my ending or my closing parentheses, so I could just add that in now and hit enter. And now we can see that this scales, so this would be 100%, this would be 96% and 24% and so on. So that's a really, really helpful one. And so I think it's just really important to play around with vectors and understand how vectors work. And if you want, just use the data sets that I provided, use your own data sets. If you want to play with even more simple examples, you could create a vector just by saying like 1:10. You'll get the values 1 through 10. And if you wanted to do 10 to 1, you could do that. And so on and so forth. You could, try to manipulate this by multiplying it by 2 and playing around with it. Or you could do that times the max of 1 through 10, which is just going to be 10. Oh no. Times the max of 1 through 10. Anyway, just play around with that, see what the numbers do, and yeah, just really feel comfortable with it, because this will help you manipulate your CSV files and get your information to get into the form that it needs to be. Alright, I think that's it for tonight, so keep barring and keep sourcing.